Hello, my name is Patricia Castro. This evening I have the pleasure of speaking with Arlan Tarhan of Convergent Alliance. Thank you for having me this evening.
Thanks for coming.
How are you?
Not bad, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you. So Arlan, in your previous communications, you've consistently spoken about how the auto retailing and franchise system is coming to a dead end. Can you tell me why you say that?
Well, mobility initiatives and the shift in segments of transportation is a clear indication of consumer trends. The increased amount of vehicles on the road is really affecting everyone psychologically, economically, and from an environmental perspective. Last year, for instance, industry delivered about 17.5 million cars, new cars. And currently there are 253 million cars on the road, and the scrap rate is only 11.5 million per year. So that means we're growing at 1.6% per year in the amount of cars that we carry on the roads. As this continues, that congestion and the economic burden and the psychological burden is going to increase. For instance, right now, particularly in Los Angeles area, the 74.1% of the drivers on the freeway are solo, single drivers. And an average car, privately owned car, is parked over 19 hours a day, and the average round-trip commute time is about 55 minutes. All of this is forcing manufacturers, industries, and the consumer to find ways basically to reduce the amount of metal on the road and to improve the efficiencies of whatever is produced to a level of 70, 80, 90% from a low of 20% today.
That makes a lot of sense.
I think so.
There are a lot of cars on the road and only one person is driving them.
Yes,
Yeah.
Most people don't believe me, but this is the truth.
I believe you. What are some of the driving forces then of change and shifts between the transportation segments?
Well, as ride-sharing and ride-hailing companies continue to grow and develop, the cost of private ownership is no longer going to make sense. That's number one. Number two, the psychological effects, the economical effects, ecological effects are all going to contribute to consumers to gravitate towards ride-sharing more and more. Like, for instance, the clear example today is if you look at the three segments of transportation between ride-sharing, taxi cabs and rental cars. Last year, they moved approximately 425 million people around in the United States, and 52% of those people were moved around by ride-share companies that people don't realize. 36% of them were moved around by taxi cabs, and only 12% were moved by rental cars. So if you look at the trend, and a few years ago there was no such thing as ride-hailing, it's clear that because of the cost effectiveness of ride-hailing, the ease of use and the application and availability and speed, people are gravitating towards that. Now add on top of that the cost of ownership, which right now, if you look at it, mass transportation costs about 50 cents a mile. A privately owned car costs about $1.50 a mile. A ride-share car costs about $2.50 a mile, but a taxi cab costs $6 a mile. So if you go further and especially take out the driver out of the equation and become fully autonomous on a ride-hailing vehicle, that cost now will dramatically drop below even $1. So when you can get a ride for less than $1, what reason would you have to own an automobile anymore? Right?
None.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Well, yeah.
Everywhere you drive, you always see Ubers, Lyfts, and if people park their cars for 19 hours on average out of the day, you might as well just save some money and hail a ride.
That's right.
So with that being said, how do you see this shift, particularly in the next decade?
Stages of mobility evolution is going to determine how things will shape up going forward, including the autonomous driving as well. But I can tell you right now that manufacturers and technology companies are investing huge amounts of money in this field, both in ride-share, ride-hail, as well as autonomous driving and developments. Like, to give you an idea, right now, Uber is valued at approximately $66 billion. Lyft is at $5.5 billion. And a giant Chinese company that started ride-hailing is now valued at $15 billion. When you look at all this large investment being made, it's clear that you're going to see the shift more and more, towards ride sharing from taxi cabs and from rental cars. For one thing, I believe in the next 10 years, both of those segments, cabs and rental cars, are going to be history. They're no longer going to exist. They'll lose their purpose. There are many other forms of ride-sharing formats and companies that are also in the works. There's 23 other ride-share companies in the United States last year that actually moved around 1.9 million people, and they were in different formats. Some of them would rent peer-to-peer, that people would rent their cars to other people. When they travel, they'd park their car and some others would pick them up, and vice versa. Some companies own their own fleet and they'll rent by the hour, not by the day. So there are very different, various types of ride-hailing that has come into picture that will take the arena and eliminate some of the conventional ways of transportation today. So to give you an idea, in the next 10 years, I believe that privately owned vehicle sales in the United States will drop as low as 7-8 million. And as opposed to a ride-hailing fleet might go up to over 2 million units.
Wow.
Yes.
I think this generation got very excited for ride hailing, and the next generation will have autonomous cars to look forward to.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
So what are some of the choices then that retailers have now to secure their future?
That's a tough question. Inherently, car dealers are notorious for moving metal and being product driven, being efficiency driven, and scale based organizations. So they have very little emphasis on relationships and on experiences and basically on human interaction. That's a clear example because they have still to this day the worst processes of any retail industry in the world. And one of the recent surveys that were done by some survey companies have indicated that out of 4,000 people, there were still only 17 people that actually said that they were 100% satisfied with their purchase experience. So that's a tough one because the culture and the experience has to shift from metal to 100% experience and relationships. How much will they succeed? It remains to be seen. But the point is, when you drop down to approximately about 6-7 million units a year, bear in mind that these are going to be 100% autonomously driven luxury cars that are probably going to be customized to each individual need. That's a different kind of selling. People are going to build offices, bedrooms, and whatever else they might need in these vehicles, and they're going to be extremely expensive, pretty much like private jet ownership or yacht ownership as we know it today. And the rest basically will, if they survive, the rest of the car retailers will probably be down to 6-7 million retailers across, and they will be owned by large conglomerates rather than little private ownerships that, as we know, the car retailers today. And they basically will become fleet operators. They're going to maintain these fleets that do the ride-hail, ride-share, as well as maintain them, refuel them, or charge them up and send them back out on the road. And that's the future.
So it sounds like car salesmen, as we know it today, will be extinct.
Well, I hate to say it, and it's difficult for them to realize, but it's coming.
Well, thank you so much for having me this evening. I feel like I learned a lot.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure.